Welcome to the Love Pod, where inspiration, vision, and real connection come alive. Wherever you are, you belong here.
Welcome to the Love Pod. My name is Nathaniel. I'm so honored to be your host for today. We're joined by a special guest, Annie Emprima, who is a wonderful metaphysical researcher. She is an author. She has an expected book coming out. We're going to be looking at how our trauma really affects our reality today, and how we can take active steps in returning to a place of connection. So we're really thrilled to have you here, Annie. I'd just like to invite you to introduce yourself, let our guests know about who you are, and what brings you here today.
Nathaniel, as you had said, I'm Annie Emprima. I deployed back in 2016. That's sort of the beginning of this grand story, grand journey that I'm on. During that time, in uniform, without any warning, without any instruction manual, I encountered a very grand spiritual awakening that opened a lot of gifts for me. And I came back with a lot of injuries. But some very weird things occurred, and I'll say weird because I still don't have an explanation for them, where these voices would say, your PTSD is for you to understand, not for you to keep. Your fibromyalgia is for you to understand, not for you to keep. So
Hmm.
as I was going through these really difficult periods, I would get these whispers to dive in. And so since 2016, in my diving in, it has become a permanent state of being and a lifelong dedication to the work that I'm doing. So that's a little bit of the beginning of my story, and I would love to share more throughout this interview.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate that. So I understand this service that you had. Do you want to dive in now? Because I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of our audience is eager to know about spiritual awakening. Maybe, there's a lot of seekers out there who are wanting that, or maybe people have had glimpses of what that can mean. So I'd love for you to share your story.
I've always been spiritual. If you had asked me in 2015 if I was metaphysical, I don't know that I would have understood the word, and I don't know if I would have understood its role in reality. Going through it while also going through very stressful deployment, it cracks things open a bit deeper. So it's a little bit harder to ignore, and you have to name it. For those that are going through a spiritual awakening or some push, prompting, tension, it's really the soul trying to speak forward, the wisdom, the intelligence trying to say something, but we get caught up in the noise of the world that we're not able to hear the whispers, so they get a little bit louder. And for some people, that might be a clairaudience, hearing things, or a clairvoyant, seeing things that other people can't see. Like they're wearing their own private virtual reality glasses, and they're experiencing something that no one else can confirm and validate. But that doesn't make it any less real. And I think that's important for listeners to understand, that a personal experience doesn't make it less real. It just makes it very unique and personal. So it can come in all sorts of different ways. It can come in, there was a period of time when I just kept getting bird feathers in my backyard without any explanation, just bird feathers. It can come in, through animal communication, through nature communication, through all sorts of different ways. And if we're open to it, we'll see those omens, we'll see those messages without overextending the narrative around it, just being open to understanding it and being curious to learn more about it.
I really love that. And I think this is such an important conversation to have. Divine is not limited in how it can talk with us, right? And it usually finds ways of talking and meaning that we will have personal association with. So I love you talk about feathers. My background, and for many decades now, learning from various indigenous peoples, there's a lot of symbolic, resonance that I would have with, feathers appearing, different points of my journey, certain animals have appeared, and I always note that. And I think, for me, it's often very You know, like when I see a butterfly in a particular moment, to me, that's a reflection of my granny. Someone might look at that and like, whatever, that's just a butterfly. But I feel like what you're saying is really important to our audience, and you know, for all of us to have this conversation because we all have such unique relationships with life, however you want to call it, whatever that you know that means to you, and to honor that internal experience and also that experience that is not really quantifiable. I feel like that's so important, and there isn't a lot of maybe embracing, especially from scientific lenses for that. You know, I remember when I was starting to go through my awakening, I was around the age of you know, being in university. It started before that, but really got some high points. And I remember talking to some of the psychologists there and said, you know, like I know that I'm not schizophrenic, like I'm having these real genuine experiences. And their best piece of advice was, I wouldn't be so sure. And I was like, okay, I feel like I'm
Mhm.
not in the right room here. So I think this is really important. And because, you know, you specialize in trauma, you know, and this idea that we're, you know, these things can really alter our reality. So anyways, thank you for opening this conversation. It really is important.
I, I couldn't say anything during my deployment. I couldn't go to the chaplain. I couldn't go to mental health, but I knew without a doubt that what was within me was in my best interest, and not just my best interest, but the best interest of the people around me. Because the voice
Mm,
might, there might have been a voice that would say, "Don't leave that person alone. Go, like, go walk with them. Don't let them walk by themselves." It
mm,
was like a grandmother's voice in my head, or and and I didn't really understand the depth of what those messages meant until after the deployment, when people came and hugged me for the first time, for the first time, not for the first time since coming back, but for the first time, you
mm,
know, a young 25-year-old male. And I realized in that moment, me awkwardly sitting next to them in those promptings where I felt these hands moving my shoulders, taking
mm,
me away from where my friends were sitting, in the chow hall, and being on the other side, a separate divider, and going to the other side, and then sitting in front of this young male. I thought I was being awkward, but what I didn't understand is he could have been praying for God, to God, asking to not feel so lonely on that deployment. And then this awkward woman, a couple of ranks higher, sits in front of him a few times. And so I didn't understand the importance of those moments. I didn't
mm.
have the awareness to understand the value of it. And
Yeah,
yet we're all interacting with each other, um, participating in each other's journey
yeah.
home back to the self.
I love that, Annie. You know, I remember a book I read long ago is called Fifth Business. And, you know, it's this idea that we play characters in other people's journeys and we don't always know the significance that we play. I've had a few moments like that myself, and it just made me reflect and listen to that voice, right? That's within. And, you know, it's you know, there's that same as hearing voices, but I feel like in deep meditation, sometimes I've heard very clear and distinct voices. Mentioned before the show, you know, like Christ appearing to me in my early 20s. And, you know, I've had some moments as I've, you know, cleansed my consciousness and become more tuned vibrationally, certain energy. Sometimes I'll have an experience, whether, you know, it's waking between dream or I'll hear a voice. And you know, I think as our species remembers that we are multidimensional beings living a multidimensional experience, and there's more conversation around this. There's more, as you talk about, you know, this the emerging field of neurospirituality and this idea that we are even the fields of study that we're a part of are expanding and growing to start developing language for these metaphysical understandings and bridging the gap between spirituality and science.
Yeah. Yeah. When we look at metaphysics, what it is at the simplest level is the beyond physics that we haven't yet learned how to measure. It doesn't make it less real, less physics. We just haven't evolved as a species to understand how to measure it yet. And in our society, we need reliable, predictable, repeatable data. But if everyone's having a very unique neurospiritual experience, there is no reliable, repeatable, predictable data. So it's having to zoom out even wider in the definition of someone's experience. And we're not quite ready to understand that yet
Hmm.
as a society. But
Yeah, it's a good point.
there is math behind it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been a lot of research into the, even I would say even recently in the last decade or so, there's been an intensification of even topics like consciousness, because that's been a problematic thing for scientists to really nail down. I mean, even I feel like it was maybe 15 years ago. I remember, it was widely accepted that consciousness is just a byproduct of the left hemisphere of the brain. And it's like, what? And yet we'll look around in nature, and anyone who's inspired, like there are, I mean, we have a long history of inspired scientists, and some of the most well-known names talk about, coming to the eventual realization that, well, in one case, you always need the one miracle to explain everything. Like there's the Big Bang, but the Big Bang of what? There's one miracle. And then there's also this realization that most of these deep thinkers and contemplators come to is like there is the mysterious. Like there's always going to be, and I think that's what gives life, the ever expansiveness. Like if we really knew it all and could understand and quantify and predict everything, well, all of a sudden, like everything's just boring, and why even have this experience at all?
Yeah. There's this there's this biological curiosity to
Mhm.
want to explore something new. So if we were to zoom out and look at it from the soul level, how exciting it is that our human stumbled upon this great spiritual moment, and how our neurons and our fascia all respond to it. As a human, it doesn't quite have the same intensity, but the expanded consciousness of who we are is quite excited by this.
Yeah.
She had this moment.
Yeah. I love how you put that. To me, it's like what a beautiful way of looking at relationships in a way that honors that scientific understanding. Like there is that, higher consciousness that's interacting with the actual biological curiosities. I love that term. I'm gonna use that because, I feel like one of the things I've been contemplating a lot lately is how children truly are our greatest teachers, but they're
Yeah.
also our greatest leaders, because they have that biological curiosity as they're learning to move their body, to take their first steps, to learn how to climb and articulate with their hands. And like there's this biological curiosity we're born into the world with, and I think it's, whether it's like major traumas that happen or this bunch of micro traumas that really start kind of either making us afraid to try new things or to learn in that way that a child does. So I really feel like this is an important part of the conversation. So yeah, I know you're writing a new book. It's coming out mid next year. How are
Yeah.
you finding that, what is some of your guidance on how we can return to that expansive biological curiosity to allow that relationship with the higher self to be more present in our lives?
If we look at the formatting of the chapters in the book, I look at it chronologically, what came before us. Systemic traumas, environmental traumas, um, family-based household traumas, that if our grandparents had financial scarcity worries or racial tension or um, patriarchal patriarchal stressors, they shared that they shared the emotions epigenetically with their children, right? Grandma being really stressed out, vibrating those emotions into the fetus of mom. Mom develops the eggs to fertilize us. That as we're being developed in mom's womb, her worries kind of get, and this was something that is really of interest to me, is how each of our ribs carry trauma, not just our organs, which
Hmm.
there's more data on, but each rib itself has its own archival system. So as we're absorbing that energy and our bones are starting to form, we're bringing that into our being, and we inherit it in. So we're carrying the wounds of our ancestors. I mean, we're also carrying the resilience. We're also carrying
Mhm.
the other virtues. So we can't forget those either. But we're carrying the heaviness, the burdens. And until we participate in the clearing, we're also carrying our ancestors. So when we look at indigenous tribes, when they're really mindful of their ancestors and honoring of the ancestors and mindful of the generations that haven't been born yet, they understood this sharing. And it's not DNA, it's not hard coded like eye color for the listeners. It's how we learn how to read the coding, how our biology expresses the inherited traumas.
Mm.
And so if we look at where we've come from and then what we've personally experienced, are we taking in the traumas of the world around us? And then what are we carrying forward? What are we, like I am on this path where it's very theatrical. And it's like the universe has set out my learning across the years and the decades, and there'll be a period it's like, let me show you what unhealed wounds look like, and we're going to set these injects of this person throwing a temper tantrum in the middle of the parking lot, yelling at you, shame on you, because he was triggered by something you did with your son. And so I have these vignettes of stories of how we then spill into the world around us. And then I look at how we are insulated by the world around us. So I call them the 6 layers of belonging, or what there really are layers of insulation that keep us safe. So if we are in alignment, attunement with ourselves, if we're not in alignment, we've got a civil war with the mind and the body. Usually in childhood, our mind takes in everyone else's voice, and then it turns around and abuses the body. So that's where a lot of our diseases and disorders come from. If we're in alignment with ourselves, we then can participate in helping those in our household be in alignment, in attunement. Then we can participate in helping to co-regulate with our friends and our family. And then our community, our neighborhood, our affiliations, and then our highest governing authority. So our country in North American countries, our country, and then our belief system. So our belief system for the listeners isn't necessarily religious. It can be philosophical. It can also be the, you're not good enough, shame on you, you don't deserve this. Those are also statements in the belief system. It's the moral compass, but sometimes that moral compass gets tainted by what we have taken in from the world around us. And so when we have those 6 layers of belonging, that's how we can help take what we've brought into the world to heal ourselves as that center responsibility, and then contribute in raising the vibration of our society.
That's really beautiful, Annie. I feel like my mind just went in so many directions with that. And I love what you said before the show. It's about helping people come home to themselves. And really that is the singular focus that emerged as we've, really contemplated and talked a lot about Light Heart Vision and what's its purpose. We're not trying to be our own big community or anything. We really want to help establish conscious bridges between communities. We see part of the problems that we've experienced is community isolation. Like there's a lot of influences out there that are trying to just build their own community. Like everyone look at me. And I feel like, from my indigenous lens on this is like, well, in our ceremonies, in our circles, we don't put human beings in the center. It's always our relationship with our creator. That's first and foremost. So how do we all synergize and come home together? And you really outline a really beautiful map. It's like it first starts within, it extends beyond all the ripples. And then at the far reaches, there's the belief system. And I would say, like there's this inverse relationship we have with everyone outside of ourselves, like the meaning we give others. And I would say that those beliefs are things that we carry. And until we heal and align those beliefs so they're aligned with truth, then it's very difficult for us to find those ways of co-regulating, as you said. So I love that picture you painted. I mean, to me, this is exactly how we create heaven on Mother Earth. Like that's our devotion. And it's simple. Like a child would understand what you just said. And yet it can be some of the hardest work in the world, right? To go to embrace those pains that maybe we've been pushing off for decades, or to really, face some of those ancestral wounds, whether it's, you're probably aware of like family constellation work, or doing some of the somatic therapies, or, there's all kinds of different ways of approaching these things. So can you give us, maybe some more insight into your journey, or and how you've seen this reflected in the people that you've touched along the way?
So, yes, I, what I'm, one of the things that we don't consider to be trauma is the disease and disorders that we are experiencing.
Hmm.
So I'm going to segue just do a
Please
little bit
do. Yeah.
of it, but that very often we don't see trauma outside of us. Like it could be the high performing CEOs going, everything's great, but they've got a lot of digestive issues.
Hmm.
The stressors, the traumas from childhood are haunting them, but on the outside everything's great. If anyone asks them, they're great. They don't need a therapist, and yet the body is saying we need help.
Hmm.
And so we very often discount our physical ailments as just our body having an expression, not our mind creating the expression. That our thoughts and our beliefs caused the breast cancer, that our thoughts and beliefs caused pancreatitis or colitis or cardiac distress. I I want to see people having more of an awareness of the relationship with their body.
Hmm.
So many people in modern society are disconnected mind and body.
Hmm.
And those invisible wounds, because the mind's not even aware that it's a wound, a trauma wound, we continue to discount it, and then we manage it pharmaceutically without ever addressing it as part of our soul wound
Hmm.
or our moral injury. So someone that had sexual violation at a very young age is carrying a moral injury
Hmm.
because they cannot, as an adult, comprehend why anybody would do that to a child,
Hmm.
incest and so on. That spiritual component within us, it needs to come back home. We need to come
Hmm.
back home and make this the greatest love story that we
Hmm.
ever experienced. And that's, so I answer that. I
No, no,
feel like
please not.
somebody
Sorry. It's
in the
beautiful what
audience
you're
right
saying.
now
No, no, you are. You
wondering.
are. This is, I mean, in terms of, from my neurodivergent way of thinking, this is exactly what I was talking about. And you present it really in a beautiful way. Like, so maybe I can offer another lens on this. So my spirit name, and to me, when I received it, it's a whole story I won't go into, but I was aware that it would be a name that would carry me. Wasn't a name that I carried. And so the name that carries me is Ondakiin, and Aki means land in Anishinaabe. So my spirit name literally translates to keeper of the land. So it's a stewardship role.
Oh,
And yeah, it's a stewardship role, right? And
mm,
I love what you're saying. And as I've contemplated this name a lot, and I mentioned like the Christ letters as well before we began, he talks about, like, he didn't talk about the mother aspect of divine consciousness when he was alive on earth, because the Jewish people saw women subordinately and they probably wouldn't have listened to him. But in the letters, he does expand upon, like, universal consciousness was riven and is in mutual equilibrium in the space all around us. But the Big Bang was the high point of those two consciousnesses wanting to express themselves. The Father being the will to drive, to create, to set, to envision, and it's the movement in everything, and that the Mother being the nurturing, bonding, and rejection, that which keeps safe and that which grows the goals, which is the physical expression of those, the form of those things. And they express physically as electricity, the Father, and the Mother expresses as magnetism. Now, from that, that's the scientific lens. But if you look from what I've heard from many indigenous elders and knowledge carriers, and there's this common sentiment that we are the land. And that's how I view my body. My body is it's a physical
right.
expression of the land, right? And so I love what you're saying, because this is I think a big part of what we don't often consider as a human species. We can be very human centric. But when we look at the land, she is we are in a symbiotic relationship with all of our relationships on the world, and we're all the land. So all form is. So I feel like we carry traumas that she has experienced, unresolved things, whether it's, you know, all that we could go and, talk a lot about what's happened here on the earth. And so I feel like it's all of our responsibility to deal with these traumas that are representational in our body, and it literally helps lighten the consciousness of Mother Earth as we resolve these particular issues within ourselves, and we become a clear channel for that higher consciousness to travel. Does that make sense to you?
Oh,
Is it
deep reverence. It's the deep reverence for the whole, it's a symbiotic system.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. I really love how you bring in this important, and you mentioned the myofascia. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because I've been really interested in the myofascia for about a year now, and I'd love to hear more. You talked about the ribs as they expand, and I think that's super interesting. Like there's memory in that. There's what is your perception of the myofascia and why it's important?
It, it is, it's the Wi-Fi of our whole body. And one of the organs that I've become very fascinated with is the pancreas.
Hmm.
From a spiritual side, the pancreas holds the soul contracts. It's
Interesting.
where the higher impact of our life, the purpose, the injected lessons that we wanted to experience. And I don't, there's not a lot of books talking about it. Uh, there's not a lot of research. And yet I've been led into this path to understand the role of the pancreas and the endocrine system and how it uses the fascia to communicate
Hmm.
the logistics movement. Like, oh, we've got this trauma coming in. We're going to send support here, here. Maybe it's the left elbow, the right knee. But if the right knee is carrying too much trauma, it has too many burdens, it has to get diverted somewhere else. So it's like this
Hmm.
logistics. Where are we storing everything? And if we look at the fascia, we have to look at it with the pancreas,
Wow.
because the pancreas is kind of like control center. It's saying, we're moving this over here. Logistically, this has to, and it's resetting the body. The fascia, especially with people with ADHD, this is my like, ooh, when people have those with ADHD, if they can master their fascia, like really use it as a superpower, the fascia, if we were to take tools from 100 years from now that allowed us to see fourth dimensional human existence, we would see the fascia isn't just under our skin. It's just not just around our organs, but it extends into our energy field.
Interesting.
And so we're not just feeling what's within the physical being, we're interacting, our fascia to some degree is interacting with everyone else's fascia.
Wow.
Like these little neural pathways that are invisibly connecting. So when you see two people that are in a great relationship, how they're becoming telepathic, how they sync in with each other,
Hmm.
they start to sway with each other in movement. It's because they've spent so much time that they've developed these invisible networks with each other. So when they separate, it's like unplugging something and then they come together and like they're interconnected and interlocked again. So from a spiritual side, the fascia is this really, it is a very, very valuable internal transportation system, infrastructure, Wi-Fi network. It is the fascinating, if anyone's ever done a macropsilocybin, they have felt all of their fascia awaken. And
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
so it's this like all the roads are like, yeah, we're here. And everything gets a microphone, little mini microphones.
Okay.
It's if people in meditation could breathe into their fascia, they're really breathing into the whole physical,
Hmm.
because it exists through our whole body. So I am very
I,
much fascinated.
like the spiritual nerd in me is really nerding out right now because I feel like I just like to talk about the whole show just about this because I feel like it's so important and there's a number of things I'd like to kind of expound upon here that have been part of my contemplation, and you've really helped connect some of the pictures there. One of them is so that um, this idea that we're connecting like energetically through the myofascia is so fascinating to me because I've seen images of like the microcrystalline structure that the fascia is, and it really does. It's like microtubules that share light. It
Yeah.
really is like our system. And my understanding too is that it really supports us however we are carrying ourselves. So if we have a posture that, say, if we're hunched over at our desk all the time and typing, well, it starts building like structural components to help with being in that posture. So it's very service oriented. It's not like, okay, fix your posture. Like this is not a good state of being for you. Like it very much is like, oh, he's hunching over a lot, so we're gonna support him and we're gonna build this. And it's like I find that really fascinating. And while my Julia was pregnant with her little one, she was getting a lot of back pain. So I
Oh.
was doing myofascia massage on her and following up the lines, and I found it so interesting how it always crosses the body, like
Yeah.
the intelligence of how we're so wonderfully designed, and it gave a lot of relief. But it's really interesting. So part of this divine synchronicity of having our little girl, and the day that she was born, the doula, who was a naturopathic doctor who was there to help deliver, uh, she let us know a little too close to our expected date. We were expecting like mid-February. So Luciana's birthday is coming up there. She's going to be 2 coming up. But she told us she was going to India to do a talk on like the 7th of November. We're like, and she's like, don't worry, I'll be back by like the 12th. And I'm like, this is really not good. She's like, I talked to my guides, it's all going to be good. But anyways, my friend who is a myofascia specialist on the doing one-on-one massage with it, he gave me some myofascia cups, and he said, because Julia was having a lot of back pain, he's like, really go around the area. She was like in her glutes and going around her sacrum and stuff. And so I did that evening. And what happened was the points around that sacrum induced her to go into labor maybe earlier that she would have gone. And
Oh.
it had some implications with the placenta coming off a little dysregularly. So we had a little bit more bleeding than normally. But I was just in that moment, I was so like amazed. Like I knew about pressure points and stuff like that, but the fascia itself, how it really is a communicator of the body.
Mhm.
And what you said about the pancreas and how it expresses trauma and regulates, like to me, this is part of the mastermind that is present all over us. And we are just like, you know, starting as a species to awaken to this understanding. So I really love that you brought in this biological element. I haven't had a conversation like this yet on the show, so I'm really excited. And you can see my passion. A little bit selfishly, I'm going to ask here because I've recently this past year recognized that I definitely have strong ADD tendencies, and I never went through the formal diagnoses, but I read Gabor Mate's book like in like a day and a half, and I'm like, this is totally me, and it's been a struggle for my whole life. So how does one activate that as a superpower if they're neurodivergent? Like how, yeah. What's your take on that?
There's a quote that says, if you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD.
I love that.
Because it's a math formula, and we're only looking at one variable. We're looking at how the body and the brain are working with each other, the fascia and the brain, the neurofascia relationship. But it's a math formula. So
Hmm.
if someone that has ADHD, what I can say is that my clients with ADHD go deeper in meditation. Everything is hyper.
Mhm.
So I get very excited when I have a client that says, "Yeah, I've been diagnosed with ADHD." Great. We're going to play because we're going to do trauma in a deeper way, more intense, hyper way. We will heal faster. But I also have to recognize their brain is a racetrack. It wants to go fast, like the Dalmatians that just want to race and race. So let's not force someone with ADHD to sit quietly on a yogi mat and meditate. Let's use that brain differently to enhance the cerebral cortex in that conscious expansion, because ADHD, it's a different board game. Someone without ADHD, their meditations are not nearly as vivid. The level of imagination, the amount of detail, the exploration, the curiosity, and the more severe ADHD is, I know like the individuals like, I wish I didn't have this. As a metaphysician, those are the people I want to go play with, because we can tap in and explore things that are just so fascinating that the average person does not have the brain capacity, the internal processing speed to reach to. So to answer your question in the simplest way is, the first step would be to find a way to get the brain to go at the speed it wants to go. Let and I use a figure 8. So for some people, it might just be using their eyes to go left, right, in a very slow way, starting, and then creating a figure 8 as they go into their meditation. So fast brains need multiple things to do. Give the brain a pattern while expanding out consciously, while taking that energy field out wider, because we're preoccupying the frontal cortex. So the back of the brain can go deeper. So
makes total sense to me. Yeah.
Simple exercise, figure 8. Practice that.
Okay. I love the figure 8 too. That's definitely a resonant number. I find this so fascinating. It makes a lot of sense too. Because I just thought everyone, like in every situation, can like hear everything around them. Like, oh, there's a plane over there and there's dogs barking over there. And like, I've just been like that my whole life. I just thought it was like a normal experience for people. It's very difficult for me. I can hyper focus, and I would memorize textbooks in high school to be out of basically fear of failure. I'm like, I'm going to memorize every single textbook. So I have the ability to hyper focus, but just on day-to-day stuff, it's been like the biggest challenge to stay on one topic. So I love that. And I understand how I can do that, because one of the first meditation, this was the other thing I wanted to talk about. The first meditation techniques I was taught formally was Vipassana. And I know there's lots of people who have gone to different Vipassanas. They exist around the world. And it means, for those listening who may not know, it's the Pali word meaning insight. And it was one of the techniques that Buddha had taught. And it has different iterations, I think, in cultures. Apparently in Burma, because they didn't allow emigration and immigration, there was very stringent laws there. They preserve this original teaching where he basically just teaches, just observe the sensations all around the body, and then eventually you can go into the body, but just observe like an inch at a time and keep that focus. And my experience of doing this for like 10 hours a day, plus as much focus as I keep for like 10 days in a row of like silence, is I started having energy centers in my body opening up. I had like so many like very vivid experience of going into other realms of existence, like other worlds, like with colors that I've never seen on Earth before, and some very vivid remembrances of other lifetimes that I've had here on Earth. And what you're saying about like that relationship with the fascia, I see that in a scientific way now. It's given me some languaging. So I want to thank you, because that makes sense how we're doing that and why that allows that experience to happen, because I was so focused, like to a pinpoint, but it allowed that expansion of my consciousness to take. At least that's what I'm hearing from what you're saying, to
Yeah.
make it back to a relative, experience that I've had.
And for listeners that may have ADHD, it's not a precise number, just sort of for reference. For every 10 pieces of information someone takes in, we're taking in 500. We're feeling, we're hearing, we're smelling, and all that extra data can get paralyzing.
Mhm.
To recognize that and to pick one thing. So for those that are listening, if going into a crowd is too overstimulating, practicing shutting down the senses, so it's just things that I can see, things that I can smell, things that I can hear. And that also helps to develop that relationship with the body too, because if we go into our meditation and we're trying to feel into the body, it can, the liver might say, hey, we got some anger, and we might have some stubbornness in the knee, and they're all trying to get the microphone. Pick one region, pick one spot, give them the microphone. Everyone else, and the whole entire the body committee has to step back, and only the organ or the zone that has the microphone gets to talk.
That's really interesting. To me, you're bringing up questions in my mind, Annie. Like you talk about the superpower that can develop through this awareness of the fascia. And I'm wondering, there are a lot of healers out there, people who are more sensitively attuned energetically, and they can, you know, in from very different modalities. Like I'm thinking of Laurel Elizabeth Keys, who she would teach toning and how to tone from the body and allow the body to make the subconscious sounds that it wants to, that we start repressing at a certain age. And she would scan people's body, and with her tone, like her frequency, she would get to a place reflectively on, say, if they were having issues with, like you said, the liver or something, it would reflect in a different way, and she would know, and then she could project her sound as an example to help realign that structure in the other person's body energetically. Sometimes when I'm working with somatics with people, I notice that too. Like I can attune to their physiology, and it sounds like this has a lot to do with our fascia and how
Mhm.
there's a communication between us. So I find this extremely fascinating.
Yeah. Emotions move through our body. And when we're looking at fight, flight, freeze, especially when we choose freeze as an option, it gets stuck. So when I use my metaphysical capabilities and I scan into someone's body, um, I might hit a part of the body, like a vertebra or an organ, and I might hear words like owie, owie, which
Mm,
tells me that we're probably in toddler years. Or I feel this sound that's silent, like, okay, we're pre-verbal, could be
mm.
even in your utero. So the words, the sounds, the experience gets stuck, and then helping it. So I approach it just a little bit differently, um, in helping individuals go back to that point in time. And I'm not healing, we're not fixing, we're reconciling.
Yeah.
Like there's just like a little glitch in the code that's give it the finishing components it needs to execute, to clear and keep moving.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, the languaging that I've used around this, in my understanding, is that we get emotional entanglements in the body that
Mhm.
require the fullness of their experience to be embraced. And so
Yes.
when we tune into these parts that often they express qualitatively, like they might have temperatures or colors or textures, and if they haven't been fully experienced, they get like they do want that. Like you said, I love how you say that they want the microphone. Like, hey, I learned from the folks at Human Garage, and I don't know if you're
Yeah.
aware of their work. Okay, they talk
Yes.
about like we can only have an attunement to like six things or a time going on in our physiology, and our brain just kind of like quietens the rest. Otherwise, it would be just too overwhelming. Since,
Mhm.
especially since in this time in history, I feel like a lot of human beings are carrying a lot of unrecognized trauma for a variety
We're
of
watching
reasons.
it play out. We are watching it play out in their language, in their behaviors, in their capacity for critical thinking. We are watching it.
Yeah, totally, 100%. Well, I'm curious. So when you're working with someone who is, for our listeners, are there any exercises? Because I've wondered a lot about this with those pre-verbal wounds that happen. How do we? Because it's not like you can just write about your experience and or have an intellectual cognitive understanding of what happens. Sometimes it's beyond words. It's just in those states. How can we do that work? Do you recommend always working with someone, or how does someone like know when they've tapped into one of those points? And are there any practical things that you find work universally well, or better than most?
If we go into quantum understanding, every in 3D, time only moves forward. We can't go back. In 4D, length with height time's a little bit different. We can kind of go forward, backward. But when we get into the higher dimensions, length with height, time, space, we can step out of time. And if we look at this from a quantum perspective, that there are multiple versions of us, and that if everything is happening all at once, that means our 3-month-old self and our current age self exist simultaneously, concurrently.
Mm.
So a simple exercise could be just going into the body and allowing that internal telepathy or imagination, if you will, speak through maybe it's through pulsing. The body might pulse or vibrate. There might be some response in a physical, or it just might be a knowing, like a ticker symbol kind of floats through and says, this is where it's from.
Mm.
I use 4 questions. These are my core questions that I use for many different purposes. Who or what are you? So when we identify that spot, when I see them as little black jelly beans. Like they're just a little too dense in the body and they're interfering with the energy flow.
Mm.
So who or what are you? Is it external, a parent, a teacher, a bully at school? Is it an event? Because it could be some identifiable acute event. Where did you come from? How long have you been here? And how are you helping me? And we always assume it's helping. It's always helping.
Yeah.
It doesn't, it's rational and logical, but the intent is to help.
That's my experience as well.
So if we always assume that it's trying to help in the best way it knows how, a 3-year-old trying to solve a problem is very different than a 30-year-old solving the same problem. Intentions are still very good. So if we understand how it's helping, we can then integrate and acknowledge so that we can align it and then alchemize it and release it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. My experience most of the time, as long as the person is sensitive enough to go there in terms of the alchemizing and the embrace that leads ultimately to release in most of the circumstances that I've been with is just simply asking it, what is it that you really want? And getting a sense of that, and then really getting into the attuned feeling of what that experience is like. So if it's like I want freedom, okay, what does freedom feel like? And like is it feel like flow? Does it feel like a complete release? And then going into the larger biology in that the wholeness of itself, and really allowing evoking that feeling for that aspect as if it's a child, and really holding that feeling, whatever that is. And I find a lot of the time that it's not like you're trying to, and that's one of the important points of this too. It's not like we're, at least from my perspective, there's no intention of changing or forcing anything on these aspects. It's really like holding the space and just giving them what they want with no expectation. It's like, here, oh, this is what you want. This is what you've been asking for, and you're, in the calling for the microphone. And in giving them, often what I've discovered is there is this little, like, a little spark of the true self that's been wrapped up, and it's like a gift, and it's been wanting to give this gift, but until we really make the time to really listen and hold space for these things, stop pushing it away with the pills or the binge watching or the food, then it has an opportunity to express and reintegrate with the wholeness of us. And I feel like this is how we kind of put the puzzle pieces back together, so to speak.
Yeah. And of course, if people can't do it on their own, this is what I do. This is my full-time practice. I have
Beautiful.
a modality. I've created my own modalities. I don't use other people's modalities. So within my Emprima method toolbox, I have a modality called the mural method,
Okay.
which takes people into a higher conscious state without hypnosis, without drugs. It's just a gift that I have. Take them to a higher state, and then we walk into the scene of their past. We're coming in as observers. I'm with the person, so my energy's with them. I'm still co-regulating with them. I can feel their heart rate. I can feel their breathing. I can feel their nervous system. And we're going to meet with the younger self.
Hmm.
So we're stepping out of time and space to visit that version's current reality. And they have 2 different experiences. So sometimes the younger self and the current will argue with each other. No, this is what's happening. But no, this is what's happening. So we reconcile that. And then we ask the younger self what they need. And then I assist the client in giving that younger self what they need energetically. And when we come back to the 3D space, it has released out of the body. It's released through all the fractals of the self.
Beautiful.
And it's a bit more complex to explain, but it has produced some really incredible and mind-blowing results because we're working in the energy space of
Hmm.
those wounds rather than in the mind space of the wounds.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And on all those multidimensional layers, like, we're talking about the fascia as the physical expression of that, but really it's kind of like the mycelium network of the
Yeah.
earth, that we're all interconnected. But, I'm a little bit of a Star Trek nerd, and, there was Star Trek Discovery that kind of reintroduced a different timeline to the original Star Trek, and how they traveled through space was through a mycelium network that connected all the stars. And I got to say this because I find this so fascinating. Um, I had this experience one time after learning Vipassana and this technique. I had a remembrance of a trauma. Like, I dropped my sister off at a location, and as I was going back to my vehicle, I saw this individual, and it just triggered something. Like, I knew this person. I never met the person before, but it really brought up this feeling of like intense, like, it was like a fear. And I was like, this is a weird energy. And I drove back. I was still living at my parents' place at the time. And I home and I said, I don't want to bring this energy in the home. So I sat out, for, it must have been an hour or more. I just put my jacket on and just sat on a rock, and I practiced this form of meditation. And when I came out of that experience, I looked up at the stars, and I could see the how all the stars were actually interconnected. There was like tubules of light interconnecting, and I was aware that I was looking at them from a higher dimensional frequency of reality just because I had spent so much time meditating. And I think there are many images of like the, master artists and constellation drawing, and maybe that's where the constellations come from. Is like the stars are connected here. And I feel like this is what we're talking to about, like, on all these different planes of existence. When we clear this work and really embrace it, I think it's, for at least from my experience, and I'd love to hear your perspective, Annie. Like, once these things are resolved, that's it's one and done, right? It's not like you have to go through, like, um years of integration and therapy. It's like it's now returned to a fullness, and it can be very, like, sudden often, these things as well. Is that your experience?
Yeah, that's the neurospirituality experience of we have this event that occurs and then it changes the way we see the world. It alters the way our brain processes reality. But I want to caveat, have a caveat with that is like you were saying earlier that our body can only handle so many things.
Hmm.
Like when I came back from deployment, they asked me where I felt the pain. I could only say my right knee.
Hmm.
I had other areas, but all of my attention was going to my injured right knee. So when I started to heal the right knee, these other symptoms came up.
Hmm.
And modern medicine's like, well, the VA, you didn't claim that earlier. Like I couldn't feel it. All I could feel was my right knee. It was so intense, I couldn't feel anything else. We do that with trauma too. When we go to lift
Hmm.
one layer, the number two now becomes number one.
Yeah.
So it's in the one and done, it's one and done for that situation. Like I worked with an individual fully blind, had the service dog, had the cane. We moved through trauma and she is seeing in color now and restoring her a year later, can see depth, can see color, and is
Amazing.
returning back to this sense of normalcy in her life. But that doesn't mean that there's not another trauma that's like, okay, I wasn't
Hmm.
related to the vision loss. I need to come up now. It's my turn now to
Hmm.
to be reconciled. So for individuals working, yes, it's a one and done for the most part. That doesn't mean number two is not going to
Yes.
come up and speak.
Beautiful discernment. I really appreciate that. And I feel like one of the, um I don't want to use the word, one of the things I've observed about human beings is we normalize miracles, and what you just said is truly miraculous.
Yeah.
And it's just as miraculous as all of us walking around and as trees growing and the regeneration that happens in nature in so many ways. So I want to first of all acknowledge you and thank you for the service to others. And I have a question, Annie. You're talking about this, and we're talking about the land. We're talking about how everything's connected, and I love this conversation. By the way, I'm like really lit up by it. Do you think some of us who are perhaps more sensitively attuned, like you mentioned, folks with ADHD or other neurodivergent types, do you think some of us come here at with the intention of maybe doing this work because we have the to literally clear it from the earth and take on things that aren't even necessarily ours to take on, but we take the full experience. We take the I don't know if I'm painting this correctly. It's like we see there are traumas here on earth, so we embody ourselves and help doing some of this cleansing work isn't necessarily stuff that because there's so much talk about like karma and this, and the way I view karma is like if love truly is the foundation of reality, then all the things that return to us that are seeds that we've planted are a loving reflection is like, hey, maybe you don't want to treat others this way. So here's an opportunity to look at it from another vantage point. But I also wonder about that altruism that we see expressed in nature too. We see individuals who just want to, out of compassion, help do this work so that it can reach a certain threshold on the planet so that we can all embody a more clear and connected biological curiosity, to use your term.
Well, let's go back to your word, stewardship. When
Mm,
we are taking in 500 extra pieces of data as neurodivergent, we're seeing things. And many people with ADHD have a much deeper, right, our sense of injustice is 500 pieces bigger.
mm,
So it's the injustice to the land, the injustice to the animals, so it's a much more, our experience is so much deeper that it becomes our calling. It becomes a byproduct of our brains functioning to want to care and have a greater sense. Our sense of stewardship comes with 500 extra pieces of data. And so that stewardship, so for me, it's people, but for you, land. And for others, it could be the energy grid or like so many environmental activists and animal activists, like Jane Goodall and some of these amazing people, that there's just such a pulling in who we are. Like our fascia is participating in the stewardship. It becomes a full body experience to want to leave this world better than the way we found it.
yeah, I
And
love
that
that.
becomes our legacy because of the way we are experiencing this lifetime.
Mm. Yeah, such a beautiful picture that you painted there. I to me this is just a deep contemplation, and I'd like to invite those of us listening, yeah, to just contemplate that. And I feel there's a lot of talk about the emergent technologies of our world. They're going to lead to different opportunities, and in some language we'll say different problems, right? Like when we don't have to have drivers in the world driving trucks, and leaving their families for weeks at a time to deliver goods because that can be automated. Well, there's a huge part of the workforce that now is going to be faced with, okay, well, what's next? And what's my purpose? And I think what you just said is really important, and why that pause for contemplation for all of us is like, well, what's really pulling us? Because
Yeah.
we're kind of leaving a time where we had to do certain things for work. I mean, now there's kids, my goodness, who are playing video games and making six or more figures just doing that. And if that's their calling, that's fine. But I'm wondering if you have any like perspective to share on that, because what you just said, I feel is very profound. Like we have this calling, but it's related to something bigger than ourselves. And I think this is like taking that question we all kind of dreaded in the education system is like, what do you want to do? or who do you want to be? And it's putting it on its head. It's like, well, what's really calling us? And it's maybe we come here to be of service to something that we don't even comprehend, but it's actually part of our physiology.
Yeah. It, it is interesting that as AI becomes more prevalent, it is opening us up, and we can't not have a sense of purpose. For those that have read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for
Yeah.
Meaning, without purpose, we are in depression, we are in self-medication, we are in the space of um, dysregulation, like
Hmm.
of no progress. We have to have purpose. And if we do it with something like stewardship, if we take that and we apply it to where the need is the greatest in our society, it is in the healing of our society
Hmm.
in all of its forms. So this is a time now where we have a lot of uh, shifting occurring,
Hmm.
and there are going to be people who can lead those shifts and others who need to follow in those shifts. They don't have the leadership capacity, but there's a movement. You're right. There's absolutely this movement toward social responsibility and the stewardship of the land, the stewardship of our history. History itself is being rewritten and erased. There's a stewardship to preserve where we've been. And for anyone that is listening that is impacted by these shifts in technology, the question is, what do we want and where do we want to go? Where do we want to go in the next 10
Hmm.
years?
Hmm.
And it's time now, instead of doing what we needed to do what we really are being guided to do.
Yeah, really, this is at the heart of Lightheart Vision, right? It's this calling towards a higher vision, not only for our personal lives, but what is our vision of the world as a whole in this higher sense? I mentioned to you earlier too, the foundational principles of Lightheart Vision are stem from what's expressed in the Christ letters, and I say that too. I'm bringing that up here because one of the most important things I've realized about why the Christ letters are important is because through his autobiography, we are getting the opportunity to heal this collective wound. I feel like many lies have been told about masters and elders and teachers who have come to impart very high levels of messages that come purely from love and to help us awaken to what we are doing when we, you know, cast stones at one another, even if it's simply judgmental and critical thoughts, or they've attempted to help us realize like we are shaping the way that reality plays out in this world. And I feel like I have multiple ways that I've thought about this. I think of my Irish ancestry and how they were colonized, and the many of the people were forced away from Ireland because their medicines were stripped away from them. They were forced to grow potatoes, which was not native there, and then what happened too with a lot of the organized religions that had impacts in indigenous communities all across Turtle Island, and how these letters are not another scripture to study. They're an expression, and he's also in them revealing like, hey, this is the pathway so that you can also be an expression of your own highest nature, which is just a word when we say Christ consciousness, but however we want to say it, but it's sattva or true spiritually enlightened self, that soulful self that wants to emerge. Is like, here's how to do it. We have to go through a cleansing of the consciousness, and you've beautifully articulated different ways that we can do that. And I love that this is the core part of the service that you're offering, Annie. And then there's the meditation process of really allowing our connection to that that divine mastermind that is pretty evident if you just go spend some time in a forest. Like, it's everywhere and everything. If you contemplate your own body, we're walking miracles that were grown from a seed and an egg and an act of love. Like, it's all so incredible. And we're it, I think one of the most important things, so there's healing that story that's been told about him, but there's also a return to like acknowledging the most important relationship that we all have with that divine consciousness itself, because it knows what will truly make us happy
Yeah.
and
It
all
helps
of
me
those
so much.
around us happy, right? So when we're aligned with that, like we don't have to push anything. We don't have to grind. Like we can be very active like bees, but the bees aren't like sweating and be like, "Oh man, I got to get my pollen quota up today. Like I'm behind, you know?" Like they're just totally in tune. And I feel like that when you say stewardship, that to me is what stewardship means. It isn't like this imposed responsibility of burden. It really is this like it's entering the dance. It's entering into the abundant the abundance, like when we're all like, yeah, this is beautiful, you know, like we're doing the work we love and we're all having a wonderful party of unconditional love here on earth. And I might sound like a total dreamer, you know, like maybe like John Lennon or something, but I really feel like this is the potential and it's the purpose that humanity was created for, to really enjoy this experience of true loving service and stewardship that you're talking about, Annie.
We see this in the blue zones where we see the
Yeah.
centenarian. This this is not that abstract. It's
Mhm.
we are measuring this in real time of these beautiful spaces around the world where people have built in layers of insulation and they have respect for their land and they cultivate the land. And this is very much something a person can go visit and experience. It's not something they read or they have to uh, go into a conscious state to a higher conscious state to experience.
Mm.
Get on an airplane or get in a car and go and visit those spaces.
I love that. I love how you really are have a gift of breaking things down to the here and now. Like to me, that term is going to be echoing in biological curiosity. You can probably hear the laughter in the background. That's our little daughter who woke up early from a nap. So we have a lot of that biological curiosity going on now in our household. And it's funny you mentioned the blue zones. We have a man who's coming on from Sardinia soon, and it's going to be an Italian. We're going to do a two-part because Julia speaks Italian, but he studies the five biological laws, and I really wish I remembered them off the top of my head. Have you heard of the five biological laws?
Nope, but I can
Yeah, it's
look it up real
very
quick.
fascinating and it's very well known in Sardinia, which is, he lives in a blue zone. And I love how you brought that up. And they understand that all disease comes from a trauma. Like that's one of the
Yeah,
five
yeah.
principles of that. And it's so holistic when he has a school community. And have you heard of school, by the way, Annie?
Like SKOOL?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So we have a community on there. I strongly encourage you to check it out. It's a place where we're finding all of our soul sisters and families. It's a real place of residence because people are just focused on their interests. So I just get talk about that for a little bit. Email from us to our community, and if you'd like to join or to create a community, I'd be honored to help you do that. I really appreciate the work that you're doing, and it's amazing. Like yeah. Anyways, you can see I'm excited because this is the kind of when we set out the podcast, we didn't know who we would be talking to, but I feel like all these threads, and now I'm seeing it really as the myofascia. Like I love it when connections really start forming in my awareness of things. It gives me it gives me perhaps the hallucination that I'm really starting to figure things out, and then until another like veil unlifts, and it's like, oh, I really don't know anything again, which is always fun.
It comes back to that full circle from our conversation of the deeper we go into psychology and it, the deeper we go into our understanding of the world, the more we realize we know so little of the world.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. Uh, I don't mean to make the whole conversation about the letters, but I love them so much. And one of my favorite parts about them are he says, once you've transcended the selfish ego drive and you come into a full understanding of who you really are and a full embodiment of that, he says that is when life truly begins. So it's like this
Yeah.
call to this like exciting adventure. And I feel like we're dan we're having tea around this. This is the conversation we're having around like what that really looks like and what the glimmers of that is. And that to me is exciting. I'm so excited for humanity as a whole and what that also means to all the wonderful, you mentioned the animals and the land itself, and like what that means for Mother Earth as a whole to enter into that celebrational um, expression of the original consciousness that was part of the seed in all of us to really come and flourish.
Yeah, very ancient blueprint.
We're hearing some of the celebration. I don't know if you can pick it up on the microphone here. No? Okay. Yeah, yeah, it's ancient. And I feel like so many people are feeling that call, Annie. Like they have a higher purpose, they have a higher calling. Have you been noticing this with people coming to you? Like, are they coming because they are wounded, or is it's because they're coming to do their work? Or maybe it's like a mix of
So,
both? Yeah. Okay.
so every person that I work with has a purpose. They're here and they come to me to work because they were pulled, called, prompted to use my methods to get them where they need to go. But no one stumbles in me just to do trauma work. It's we're going to do the trauma work so that we have more space in the body to expand the gifts that will help contribute. So it's regardless of where they start, we're all moving in that direction.
No, I really appreciate that. This is something that we wholeheartedly believe too, is like each of us has a unique purpose. We can just leave it at that. To me, it is a soulful purpose. I think the soul is just that connection that we all have to the universal. But not everyone identifies that. It's not in the scientific, but it sounds like there's an expansion happening in psychology, which I'm really happy to hear that as well. And there's I feel like it's an important conversation too. We also welcome like entrepreneurs and people starting business, and there is this like grind and hustle mentality that's often promoted in there. And not that it's bad to do more work, but certainly is maybe not in alignment with your highest health and wellness to push something that may not be in alignment with that purpose. So, what are there any practical, since you're so good at this, at offering practical, guidance for someone listening who maybe is like knows that they have a higher purpose, but doesn't really know what that is and how to start connecting with that?
If I were to give a very quick answer, I would say go back to what we wanted to do when we were 5. Our 5-year-old self was still in that theta zone. We
Hmm.
had moved out of theta. So our imagination was taking us, like our pancreas was sharing what was in the soul contract.
Uh,
You're here to do this. And then the world kind of molds around that. We usually go back to what we wanted, what we declared in kindergarten. I'm going to be this.
Yeah, that's so
We like,
fascinating. It's funny. I wanted to be an artist and a scientist, and I kind of feel like I'm getting to do that now.
I was 10 years old. I declared I wanted to be a teacher. And then I spent my whole life wondering, because I just assumed it was in a traditional institutional setting. Nope, nope.
Hmm.
I am a teacher. Just
Yeah, totally.
not at
Well,
all what I could have comprehended at 10.
it's funny too, like we're given a lot of beliefs about what teacher means. And
Yeah.
part of what I've always been fascinated in language and especially the meaning in language. You brought up Viktor Frankl's work, which is so important. When I read that, I was like, wow, everyone needs to read this. And I know that not everyone has the heart to read this because it goes deep into that experience. And the root word of education is to educe, which means to draw or bring out what is within. And we all know, if hopefully we've all had at least one true teacher in our life that has helped that. But so much of the education system is really indoctrination. It's really about pushing all this stuff that really can cloud that ability to hear the whisperings of the soul through the pancreas. And like eh, I feel like that's really important, simple advice is like return to that childlike state and what really lights you up. And because at the end of the day, I feel like when we're really living our purpose, like you're going to want to leap out of bed. You're going to be like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I get to do this. I get to make this really beautiful painting that I've been thinking about, or I get to go and on a field trip with students and really explore a new dimension of awareness called the zoo, or maybe hopefully not zoos, maybe that's a little bit, but like go into this new environment and like something is gonna make you feel like that 5-year-old self that yeah, that feeling of aliveness. So I love that you painted that way, Annie. That's really great.
The body gets excited, it gets curious.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, you're such an expression of joy. I really appreciate who you are, Annie, and I'd like to have like to keep this conversation going with you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I'm wondering what is the best way for people to connect with the work that you're doing? Where are you spending your time, and how can people really access the all this beautiful information you're sharing and work with you one on one?
It for those listening that are feeling this magnetic tug, go straight to my website. Sign up for a discovery session. It's a 1 hour session. I will be able to scan in and see how compatible we are, because it really has to be compatibility. Not everyone's ready to work with me, and not everyone's designed to work with me.
Hmm.
And the discovery session will still be it'll be very fruitful. It'll let me know if my modalities are a good fit. So if someone's feeling that indescribable pull, that's where to start. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm on YouTube.
Okay.
For as long as TikTok exists, I will be on TikTok for whatever duration we have with it. And that's where I do my lives right now, is on
Okay.
TikTok. So
Okay.
if people want to see, every Friday at 6 Pacific, I do what we call Annie's Playground. This is how much of my research comes to be, is this idea just floats in my head like I'm reading a fortune cookie. Check the pancreas. So then in Annie's Playground, 6 o'clock on Fridays, I have a paid audience. I'm scanning them to see what's similar, where the patterns are. Is it
Okay.
something worthy of my time to dig into? And so people can watch that unfold in real time.
That's really awesome. I appreciate that. And like I think that's important that people, just like the idea in family constellations, is you can vicariously get a lot of the benefits from witnessing this kind of energetic work. Because the truth is, a lot of patterns are similar across families, and sometimes we think we're so unique, that we can't. We don't have, oh, I'm just made so different, it's not going to work. And I really love that you qualify people to that, I think a lot of healers need to hear this because not everyone resonates in the same way. I've worked with certain people that don't have the same kind of, awareness to like tune into even what their knee is feeling like. So it's hard to do some of the work that I'm inclined to do with folks. And I really appreciate it, Annie. I'm going to tell you a little bit about school. I got to, I know we're still live, but what I love about it is all based on authentic interactions, and you can do like lives in your classroom. There's an opportunity to have lives within your community, and they even have a webinar function now, so you can have a webinar where you can call up certain audience members that you resonate, and you can record it inbound, and then you could like put it up on a YouTube or whatever. And what it allows for is that container where people can tune in. And what I really like about the way that schools designed is, first of all, the UI is unlike any place I've been. It's so neat and clear, and there's no ads. So it's all about authentic
Oh,
engagement, and every community is gamified in the same way, but you can customize it to be in any way you want. So there are levels that you work through, 1 through 9. You can't go beyond 9. And so to get to level 2, you need 5 points. And what that means is you need five likes, whether on a post or a comment that you share. And you can have like on level 2, it activates a free giveaway in the classroom, or it activates people. You can now post or talk to one another. So you can set your community how you want. And what I love too about it is school itself is like this thriving ecosystem where communities are building bridges between one another. So I have friends who are in various communities, and we get together, have lives and things. And I've met a lot of wonderful people through that platform, because it's purely based on resonance and interest. And so, yeah, I really I can't say enough good things about it. To me, it feels like my first true, authentic online experience, and I just love it. I feel like it's what the internet was always supposed to be, and I've never been a guy who liked to be online. Like if you found me in my like my downtime, so whatever that means, I'm like probably barefoot in the forest picking up sticks and like doing firewood, or like drawing, like looking at butterflies, like I'm like that's me, like that's my childlike self. But I found on school, like I'm meeting so many interesting people. There's this really beautiful community true community experience online. And I haven't found that on any other platform. So I'm like an unofficial ambassador of
You're
school.
telling me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, you're totally welcome. Our community is free to join, and so if you want to kind of explore some things and be a presence in there, I'm also going to be uploading all of our Love Pod episodes in there. So, for anyone who joins, I'll be highlighting you and introducing you to the community there as well. So, to create some conversation, and I know a lot of people are going to get a kick out of this conversation. I think, like, I have some like myofascia nerd friends and things like this. So this has been a really like a thrilling experience for me talking with you, Annie. And I hope you feel the same way. I really like your presence and what you're bringing to the world as a unique expression. I have one last question for you before
Okay.
we get the live. So this is an experiment in consciousness where I like to ask some of our guests who come on, if you had a megaphone and you could talk to the whole world at once. You talked about the cells of our body having little megaphones, like, oh, I got it, and everyone could listen to you. What would you say to everyone?
We have an obligation to help each other heal, but it's not in healing others first, it's in healing ourselves and allowing that healed self to resonate and impact others.
Mhm. That's beautiful and so succinct. I really appreciate that. Wow, so wonderful talking with you, Annie. I look forward to our next conversation. And unless you have anything else to say, I'm going to invite our daughter Luciana to give a farewell to us.
I'm good.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much again for coming on, and to all our listeners, thanks for joining us. Please do like and subscribe, and you also are invited to join our school community. And stay tuned for our next episodes coming up soon. Okay, I'm gonna invite Luciana up. Thanks for watching. You say ciao ciao.
Bye.
I love you so much.